I just remember thinking like, okay, don't let me mess this up. You know, don't let me hurt this deer.
Right.
You know, let it be like one clean shot. Let my bullet fly true. And it did. And I just remember like, boom, I pulled the trigger and I saw the deer just drop straight to the ground.
Welcome to Big Fish Stories, the podcast dedicated to telling the real outdoor stories of adventure, hunting, and fishing. For the outdoors men and women who get lost in the stories around the campfire, this is the place for you. My name is Tyler Hendricks, located in the great state of Idaho, and today I have my longtime friend, Ben. Growing up, did you have any sort of inclination that you'd want to be an outdoorsman or even that you'd want to play in the mountains and be adventurous in that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like we grew up, my mom we would go camping at least once a year. And that was one of our favorite things. I remember as a kid, you know, looking forward to camping. We did tent camping. We always made fun of my grandparents for bringing a camper along. Cause it's like, that's not real camping. You got to have a tent and a sleeping bag. You know, you're just bringing the house out into the woods, you know.
That's the same argument. Amory, my wife, her family owns a camper RV dealership. And I remember the first time we went camping up at this big mountain lake. I remember her being like, "We're sleeping where? What are we doing?" I'm like, "This is camping. Like, we're not staying in a camper or an RV. That makes no sense."
Right.
That's ironic considering your life is camping now, RV style.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty rustic.
I see it as the opposite. I'm bringing the woods to my house
instead
of bringing my house to the woods.
Totally. Yeah. Sorry, interrupted. Continue.
No, that's good. But yeah, we always, you know, we'd go hiking every weekend. You know, we'd try to get out, and even if it was just like a small, you know, like the Sunol Animal Reserve that's in the Bay Area, and but we'd go down to like, you know, Santa Cruz Mountains, down to the beach, and, you know, have fun outside. We were pretty, I mean, growing up in California, it was year round where, I mean, the winters weren't too bad where, you know, we can go do things that didn't involve like snow sports. And that's why I'm not a very snowy person.
Trying to get away from
Trying to get away. I tried to acclimate to the snow for the last 10 years and I just couldn't do it.
It's tough.
It's very tough.
You're not a Nordic Viking type person.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I have no fat on my bones.
That's a good thing.
To keep me warm.
That's a good thing.
But yeah, so it's funny actually because growing up, I don't know where this perception came from, but I always thought of like, I never really liked the hunting scene.
Right.
I was always off put by it. And I don't know if it was just like growing up in the suburban like city area, but I always just, you know, I don't know where this came from like culturally, but it was always like, oh, this redneck country music kind of, you know, thing that just wasn't my vibe, you know?
Right.
And so I never really put any thought into it. And like we would go, like my dad would take us fishing and stuff when we went camping, but it was always like throw the pole in the water, put it in the little pole stand and like put a bell on the end and just wait
for something to happen.
Just wait for something to happen.
Yeah.
You know, so it was never really like, oh, I love fishing, you know, because it catches a fish. It's like, oh, hey, look.
It's like a side thing that you do while you're camping.
Yeah, exactly. But I do remember going also fishing, like when we visit my grandparents in Florida, you know, do some like deep sea fishing or catch you know, I think I caught a grouper one time that we actually were fried up. So that was cool. I was like, oh, I just ate this fish that ate this fish that I just caught.
Yeah. Was that one of your first experiences of actually obtaining meat from the wild and
probably
and cooking it? Yeah. It's a cool perspective when it first happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been dealing with it, you know, growing up, my dad did so much hunting and fishing, but I honestly never remember him actually cooking the things we hunted and fished for. It was almost like he would make them, but he figured the rest of the family didn't really want to eat it.
Oh, really?
You know, because I just don't ever remember being like, we're eating, you know, deer steak.
Right.
I just don't remember that. I'm sure it was there here and there. It was, you know, mixed into tacos or spaghetti or something like that. But I never remember actively thinking. Yeah. I never remember actively thinking like, this is the deer my dad shot. This is the fish my dad caught. until I experienced it myself. And I was like, this is the fish I caught, and now I'm eating it.
Right.
It's a weird experience when it first happens. And it's crazy to think that most Americans never experience that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. All the meat I eat is, except for chicken, all the meat I eat is pretty much elk, deer, fish that I caught.
Yeah. Which is awesome, which is great.
It's how it should be.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue.
Yeah. I don't know if fish are weird because they're just so alien.
Yeah.
That, you don't really like think of them. I don't know. At least when you don't like, I don't know. Maybe some people do, but it's like,
there's less of a respect for the life, I think. Because unless you conscientiously go into it going, I'm taking this fish's life for me to eat. Right. Most of the time, I think it's considered kind of like chopping a vegetable and eating it. Like the life is not as honored, I think, most of the time, unless you. Yeah.
Not that it shouldn't be.
It should be.
But like, it's just
takes a little more thought.
We're so disconnected from fish because it's like we can't really see them. They're under the water, and it's like all of a sudden they just appear on this fishing pole. Right. Like, whoa, where'd that come from? I'm gonna eat it.
Right. And you don't assume it much about its life.
Right. Because it doesn't have the normal like characteristics that we're used to in like animals, like eye expressions and like it's just like going like this when you catch it and you're like, whoa, what the hell is that?
Yeah, right. Totally.
So yeah.
So that was the first experience, catching a grouper.
Yeah, I remember
a big grouper, like one of those Goliath groupers. Or
no, like it was a regular
okay,
grouper.
Gotcha.
Like I think it was like probably like.
When I think of grouper, all I think of are giant fish that eat sharks.
Oh no, not that one.
Okay.
No. This was just a small one. Yeah, but yeah, I do actually remember catching that and eating it and just be like, oh wow, this is cool. Like we're eating this fish I just caught out of the water, whatever, wherever we were. I don't remember. Like a channel, Florida has all these different channels and stuff. I think it was just off the dock too. So
wow.
Yeah. So that was a cool experience. But yeah, like, so when I moved here, back in I was 25 and, I came here because I wanted to spend time in the mountains.
Right.
I missed the mountains after living in Texas for 4 years. And, so I was like, I need some mountain time. And, and then it came to the time where you're like, you're a big hunter. And I was like, oh, okay.
I guess cool. I'll go with
I guess I'll go. Like,
was that your first year here or the second?
It was the first year. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Cause you're like, I'm going to go hunting. You're going to go just like, you don't have to hunt. You can just, I was like, yeah, I'll just go hike with you.
Yeah.
And watch you.
Was the first time you went the time I missed that deer? Was that the first time?
I don't remember. I think it was. Well,
I think it was.
Which one are you talking about? The one up Boulder?
The one up Boulder. Yeah. Not to give specifics.
No, I feel like. No, because I was hunting that year.
Were you? No. Because remember, it was 2 days after that I shot that other buck.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
So we should tell that story.
Yeah. So that was a good.
Well, tell from your perspective, the first time you actually went out, was it very different than what your expectations were of what hunting is? Yeah.
I don't know, because I don't know if I really had any expectations of hunting. It was just something that I didn't really think about.
Right.
It was just kind of like, I don't know.
A redneck thing that people do. And,
and it was kind of like
experience for it.
Yeah. Like I had, you go out and you shoot deer, and I don't know, maybe I saw like, probably just, from things you see, mounts and heads in stores, and it's just kind of like, whatever. It's just not something I was interested in.
Right.
Didn't really give much thought to it. But for me to go out with you, I was like, oh yeah, I'll go spend out time outside in nature with my friend, and he's doing this thing. So it's like, oh, I'll just go hike around with him, and
I'll hike while he hunts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I do remember that first time, and I don't know if that was the first actual first time that day.
I'm pretty sure it was.
Was it? Okay. I can't remember.
Because it was a longer hike. We did something. I've never hunted that particular area the way that we did. I believe we drove up and then we started hiking parallel to all the boulders up there. And we kept just hiking ridge after ridge after ridge, just going down into saddles, up over ridge, down into saddles, up and over ridge.
Yeah.
And it had to have been like 1 p.m. It was in the middle of the day.
Yeah. It was late in the day.
But before
After
that,
starting in the dark.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Gosh, the viewers are getting a lot of my dumb mistakes in a lot of these stories.
That's all right.
It's part of it.
It's part of it.
Before that, I remember I stepped over a log and my gun fell off my shoulder and I grabbed the shoulder strap and it swung. And I remember the scope just pinged off this rock.
I remember seeing it happen.
And it was this loud ding.
Yeah. I was like,
I literally remember thinking, I really hope I don't see a deer today. Because if anything were to throw off my scope, it was how that scope fell was so perfect to just bump it off enough.
Now, if anyone's watching, to Tyler's credit, we were on a hill that was like this angle, and we were, going around this gully or whatever, trying to get to the other side. So
it
wasn't just like he was just stepping over a log and dropped his gun.
It was like we were trying not to fall the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
And I happened to step over.
Yeah.
I stepped over a log and it just fell off my shoulder.
Yeah.
Perfect scope punch.
Yeah. Yeah, and it wasn't even that hard because you you caught it and like kind of pulled up, but it was just like a dink. Yeah, and you're like,
And we were far enough in where it was kind of like, well, we're seeing this area. Odds are we're probably not going to see a deer because it was after the morning hunt. It was after prime time, and so it was more of us just experiencing the next ridges over, seeing what those looked like. I didn't have a ton of expectations of us seeing a deer at that point. So we continued hiking, continued going up and down these ridges, and frickin' sure enough, big boy buck came out of nowhere.
And I wasn't even, we had split up. Because we were starting to go down and there was a big aspen forest. Mm-hmm. And you were like, hey, why don't I'll go around to the backside. Mm-hmm. And if you just cut right through that forest, you might spook something out and I can shoot it. Right. And I was like, okay. So I'm going through this thick forest, crunch, 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 looking for deer. And, like, oh, I hope I spook something out of here. Right. Not really knowing what I'm doing. And then I hear a gunshot all of a sudden. And I'm like, I hope that was Tyler. Yeah. And then so I just like run, instead of going down, I run toward where you had gone so I could, not get in front of you and then, find you. And then I, sure enough, I find you. I think you were like sitting. Mm-hmm. And then you shot like 3 times total?
I shot 3 times that first round.
The first round, yeah.
And realized my gun was not shooting right, but I was trying to figure out where, which is not smart. You should just stop if you know your gun's off. But this buck was for sure the biggest buck I had shot at, or I was shooting at that point. Biggest buck that I had the potential to shoot.
Yeah. In your life or just that year?
In my life at that point. Wow. And I ended up, 3 days after that is when I took the biggest buck of my life. Yeah. But the buck that I was shooting at was bigger than him. At least in my mind. That's always how it is. The buck you missed is always the biggest buck you've ever.
Story.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I shot 3 times and realized my gun was off, but couldn't quite figure out if it was off high or low. And I didn't know by how much. I just knew I was completely missing because the buck was just kind of standing there, moving back and forth.
Right. I think I remember seeing, dirt shoot up above the deer. And I was like, what is Tyler doing?
Yeah. And then I blasted through the forest past you because he ran just barely out of sight, so I couldn't see, but I could get through that forest. And then I shot 3 more times.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
After I got through the forest.
Right. Okay, that's actually, that's when I caught up to you.
Yes.
From behind.
Yeah.
So you shot the 3, and then you ran down closer. Yep. And then I remember being close to you when you shot 3 more times.
Yeah. And I gave up after 6 shots. Yeah. I was like, something's wrong.
And then we went and then he ran off, and then we went and like scoured the whole hillside
making sure there was no blood.
Yeah.
Turns out I was shooting like 3 feet high because of that stupid scope ping. I don't know how high I was shooting, but I know that the distance.
But 3 feet at what? 300 yards?
350, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, it was completely off. I remember we went to the range and I shot and it was like 12 inches high at 100. So it was really high at 350.
Yeah.
And yeah, got it sighted in, and then we had an awesome hunt the next time we went up. But I remember being probably the most mad I've ever been on a mountain.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't think I said a word.
Yeah, but I could feel it.
Yeah.
Like I was just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna.
I
felt I was
hiking
like
in the mountains, enjoying the experience.
Okay, but at this point, like, first of all, for me, having come from Texas, like I am 5,000 feet. You know, I mean, obviously I'd been there for a couple months because I'd gotten here in June. So it'd been a couple months. I was kind of starting to acclimate to the elevation. I remember my first hike up here. I thought I was having a heart attack.
Oh, yeah. You were using Amory's inhaler.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, why am I so out of shape?
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, that was a brutal hike because we hiked for half a day.
Yeah.
You know, just going through the forest. So I remember being exhausted, but I felt so bad. I was like, I'm going to find this blood.
Save this hunting day.
Save this.
Yeah.
Because I just felt bad. I was like, man, that sucks.
Yeah. It's horrible. I hate that feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I said a word the entire way back. I don't even think we stopped.
No,
I just literally just trudged all the way back. I'm not stopping. I'm going home to re-sight in my rifle. That's all I could think of.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, but then
I'm surprised you went with me again after that.
Yeah. Well, it was fun because like I remember through that hike, you know, we were going through the forest and stuff, and then you would point out like rubs on trees and, you know, poop and like, you know,
the smell.
The smell. And so it was like, at that point I was like, I have no idea what a deer smells like.
Right.
You know, and you're like, oh, you smell that? And I'm like, I don't know. It smells like the forest,
right.
I guess.
Yep.
You know, and then so it's like, you just put that in my mind, like, oh, this is hunting. Like, oh, this is cool.
Right.
Like, you know, this isn't like whatever I thought it was, you know, just going out and like murdering animals.
Stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're just out there drinking Coors Light.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people think that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there is a lot of that, unfortunately, but, you know, I think there's a lot more to it than, you know, when you're consciously hunting for, I think, the right reasons.
Right.
But
I think shows like Meat Eater and Donnie Vincent's shows and stuff like that
they really
have really helped
perspective.
Change that perspective of what hunting should be.
Yeah.
And if you're inclined, you know, if you grew up with a family that is more of a redneck hunting family where they're out drinking beer and shooting, if you watch one of these shows, I think you all of a sudden go, oh, I might be doing this wrong.
Hopefully.
Because these guys are not out drinking and they have to stay in pretty good shape in order to be able to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my
first experience. Yeah. But then I think we went out. I think it was just the second day we went hunting, right?
I think it was the third. I think first day, and then we sighted in the gun the second day, and then I think we went the third day. Something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, second time we went.
Second time when we went out. And then this
hike was horrible.
Yeah, and you took me on this like straight up this mountain, and I was like in the dark, and you're like,
and there was no warm up.
Yeah, there was no warm up.
There's not like you're hiking a trail for a little bit. It's like park the car, go straight up a mountain.
Yeah. Just straight up this thing. And I don't know, we probably went 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet up.
Yep. And I'll say this because you're probably a better hiker than me now. But at that time, I remember you were dying, like feeling sick, lightheaded, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it
was cold.
Yeah. And I think the reason I even got that buck is because you weren't feeling good and we needed to side hill over quick. I don't know if we would have even seen that buck if we would have.
Yeah, because you wanted to get to the top at sunrise, right?
Yeah.
But we made it maybe halfway up.
Most of the time, to paint the picture for the viewers, most of the time on this particular area, you hike straight up a mountain and it's really steep. I'm not exaggerating when I say I think it's 1,300 vertical feet within less than a mile.
Yeah.
So every single step is burning your calves the entire way up. And you're most of the time on your hands and you're using your hands to navigate and make sure that you're leaning forward so you're not tipping back. And most of the time you get
And
to
there's loose rock.
loose
You're
rock,
trying not to make
shale.
a lot of noise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's pitch black dark. So you never know when you're getting to the top. I know because I've been there enough and understand the terrain, but someone who's never been there, it's a daunting experience because they're like, how long are we going to be doing this? Normally what you do is you get to the very top of this mountain and it's not even the ridge that you're on. It's usually the ridge on the other side where you see these really big bucks. This was third day in the season, so I'm guessing there was some resident bucks still on that hill that I've never experienced. But because you were not feeling it, we were moving pretty slow. And I remember thinking, sun is rising, we have no choice, we're not going to make it to the top in time. Let's side hill over to this other ridge where I've seen some smaller bucks, and we'll see if we can get a shot in there. And so you being sick is the only reason I got the biggest buck I've ever got, in an area that was like,
You're welcome.
yeah, thank you. In an area where it was such a nice drag. But from your perspective, tell me.
That sounds funny.
A nice drag out.
It's such a nice
Such
drag.
a nice drag.
Such a drag. But it's a nice one.
No, we were able to drag that thing out whole.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember that.
And it wasn't horrible. From your experience, what was that like? As far as the hike up was obviously horrible, but then once we saw the deer and you knew I was going to shoot, and I even think you saved me because I was about to shoot the ground right in front of me, and you said something like, the ground is in front of you or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
because I was like looking at your
over.
You were looking over, but then like I saw your barrel and it looked like he was like pointed at a rock or something.
Yeah, in my
that
scope,
you couldn't see.
in
And
my
I was
scope,
like,
I couldn't see.
you might want to move forward.
Yeah, which probably saved me too.
Yeah, no, that was a brutal hike. I remember that. Like that was just, like you're not kidding. I was dying because I was like, I think I remember at one point like, I don't think I can do this. I was like, I'm sorry, Tyler.
Leave me.
Like, yeah, like I don't want to ruin your hunt. Like, you just go, like, I'll just kind of like wait here.
Right.
You know? And you're like, no, it's okay. It's already like, the sun's already coming up. It's like, let's just go over here and, look over.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, I can do that. And then I just remember being really out of breath, like kind of slowly following you. And then, I think, you came over that ridge and, you're like, be quiet. And you saw the deer. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, I was trying to look because like you saw them, I didn't see them. So I was like looking and I finally saw them. You were scoping it out. And then I warned you about the rock. And and then, you fired, which is very loud and unexpected if you've never been out there doing that. I remember seeing the deer, did your deer drop or did it run a little bit?
This deer was a strong frickin' deer.
'Cause I might be mixing it with mine.
And I was so paranoid because I had a bad shot already that year that I shot and immediately, boom, was loading again.
Yeah.
So I actually shot that deer 3 times through the lungs.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
And the first shot hit and I knew it hit, but I was so paranoid that my gun was still off, even though I had just sighted in the day before. Right. Loaded another round. He jumped forward, stopped again, shot, jumped forward, stopped again, shot. And then, when we came up on him, he was just no meat. Yeah. No meat was ruined on that.
Right.
We nicked. There was one bullet, I think, because I did take 4 shots. I unloaded the whole clip. One bullet had nicked the very top of it, which I think was the third or fourth shot, but there were 3 bullet holes through the lungs, and somehow no shoulder meat was ruined, nothing. And it was a pretty close shot. I think it was an 85-yard shot.
Yeah. But I remember just being so stoked like that you got one. And I remember,
and it was the biggest one still to date that I've gotten.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was a big 4x4. And as far as its width and its mass and its height, it's the biggest one I've gotten.
That's because I don't think I've been there for any other deer, have I?
You must be my good luck charm.
Yeah, but I remember coming up on that, we waited and it was just kind of like this adrenaline rush of like, yes. And then I remember, I don't know if it was then or whatever, but I remember at some point I was like, I'm buying you beer and pizza.
Yes. Oh yeah. Because at this time you didn't even like beer.
Yeah, that's right.
And I kept telling you, one of these days when we have a horrendous hike, it's going to cross your mind that like beer and pizza would be so good right now. And that was the start of you being like, maybe beer is kind of good.
Yeah. Maybe it is kind of good.
Yeah.
So I remember I was like, I'm going to buy you some beer and pizza when we get home.
Yes.
Because we were just so
that was
exhausted.
The best beer and pizza ever.
It really was.
But what did you think? What was was there anything shocking about the experience to you? Seeing a big giant animal dead on the ground after that.
Yeah.
And then the process of gutting it out and dragging it down. And I think you helped with butchering and all that kind of stuff. I know you have since then.
Yeah.
Has there been any shocking things that you wouldn't have expected with all that? Even emotionally, is there a shock to it?
I remember it being heavy. Mm-hmm. Just walking up to the dead animal.
Emotionally heavy.
Yeah. The deer was also very heavy, but just physically.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just kind of like a moment. It was just like, oh wow, we just, you took the life, but I was part of the experience, you know? And so it was just kind of like, oh wow, okay, this is not what I expected,
Right. Like, it's exciting.
It was exciting, like, oh wow. And then we realized what we just did, you know? And so then from that point on, you're like, okay, now I have a responsibility, or we have a responsibility to this life to make sure that it's, it's used well. Right. And that it didn't die in vain, so to speak. And I remember that even more so when I got my first deer, 2 years later. Yeah. In pretty much a very similar spot. It was the exact same spot, I think. Somewhere on that same ridge. It might have been the next ridge over. Yeah. But we did the same thing, and we came and we're like, okay, let's go over. We'll do the same thing we did. Yep. And then we saw a couple bucks. Yep. And the bigger one that you wanted had ran off, but a smaller 2x2 had stayed. Yep. Kind of like, right. Why is everybody running? Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I can take that one. Yeah. Like, I don't care how big it is. Right. And I remember I turned to you, I was like, there's a buck here. Do you want it? And you were like, yeah, I guess so. I was like, oh yeah. It was almost like shocking that you were about to do it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Cause you go out with this intention of like doing something, but then when the opportunity presents itself, you're like, oh, okay, do I actually do this or not? Right. And then especially, being through that experience with you, and then, okay, now it's my turn, and, just being able to, and going through, because I went, the next year is when I first started hunting, and didn't get anything, put in the effort, put in, the work, like, okay, I'll give it a shot after that first experience, and realizing that hunting was something, I didn't even know what it was, but it was like, okay, this is something maybe I should explore. Going through, I think it was my third year of actually hunting myself that I got the deer. Yep. So going through 2 years of complete failure and disappointment, even though it was a great experience of just, getting out in nature and pushing your body physically and learning. And, every year I learned something new and, different experiences that I could take into the next year. But finally, when the opportunity presented itself, it was like, oh, is this actually going to happen this time? Right. Right. And what's that going to feel like? Right. Yeah. And nothing can prepare you, not even 2 and 3 years or seeing someone else hunt. Right. Nothing can prepare you for you actually doing it yourself. It's kind of like becoming a parent. Nothing can prepare you for that. Yeah. Now I understand that. Now you understand. And so, I just remember I had a gun that I was borrowing from my father-in-law. It was sighted in. I was comfortable with it. But, I was probably not going to shoot anything past 100 yards. Yeah. I remember you saying, I'm not shooting anything over 100 yards. And I was like,
okay, well, most of the time you're shooting over 100 yards in Idaho.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're like 100 yards is my max. Yeah. And I think that's right where the deer was. It was right around 100.
It was right. It might have,
Maybe even like 80.
Yeah. It was pretty close.
Yeah. That's why when I saw that deer, I was like, there's a deer just right here.
Yeah.
Do you want it?
Because I remember like focusing on all the deer that ran up, and I don't even think I noticed that one.
Right.
And then you're like, there's one right there. Like, I'm not going to shoot it. It's too small.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, I'll shoot it. And I remember like, I didn't have a bipod or anything. Like you were all fancy, but I just like got down on my knee, like propped my gun up with my knee and my arm. And I looked at it for a while. It seemed like a long time. Like, you're looking through that scope right at that deer,
right,
trying to find the right spot, just looking at it like as it's like,
right,
going like, where'd all my friends go?
Right. Why are they running?
And yeah, just like kind of slowly taking a breath and then just saying, okay, here we go, and pulling the trigger. And then I just remember like, I don't know. I just remember thinking like, okay, don't let me mess this up. Don't let me hurt this deer.
Right.
Let it be like one clean shot. Let my bullet fly true. And it did. And I just remember like, boom, I pulled the trigger and I saw the deer just drop straight to the ground, and it didn't have, it was just, that was it.
It was done.
And I felt really good about that because I was like, I don't know how I would have felt if like
it ran away
or I caused it suffer some harm. So I was like, okay, good. At least that, and then it was just like this rush of like, oh my God, I just did it.
Right.
I just hunted my first time, like successfully. And then it was just like, okay, getting over that, breathing hard, breathing heavy, and then waiting, And then when we finally got down to there, it was even heavier this time because it was my bullet. It was my finger, that pulled the trigger. And so, it was like, okay, wow, I just took a life. And that was probably, besides insects, like, and fish. Like that was like the first.
They're the same thing.
The same thing, insects and fish. That was like the first like life that I took intentionally, you know, and it was, there's nothing that could prepare you or any way I can explain it.
Yeah, it's a mixture of, as much as you try to explain it, it's impossible, but it's a mixture of like 3 different feelings that you normally don't feel all at the same time.
Right.
It's disbelief.
Yeah.
It's remorse and excitement.
Yeah.
All at the same time. You never experience that any other way. And so to have all those 3 feelings combined into one thing feels very dreamlike.
Yeah.
And it's important to be able to sift through those emotions. Sometimes those emotions can lead to people never hunting again, or it can lead to people going, this is the lifestyle I want. Either way, I think the biggest emotion that needs to come through is that remorse for the life that you took, so that you have that respect for the animal and you utilize it properly afterwards.
Right.
Yeah. Because I think that can get missed. People get numb to it.
Totally.
Because they don't want to feel the remorse.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to feel that, so they block it. And then they're just numb to it.
Yeah. Because it's hard.
And then it becomes just killing for killing's sake.
Yeah. Like, all right, cool. But yeah, so I remember just really wanting, I remember reading about like, Native Americans and how they hunted and, really like, they would say, thank you, brother, and, they viewed animals and nature really as their brothers and sisters, we were all part of it. So I was like, okay, I want to take that and learn from, a culture that hunted for survival. Like that was their way of life. So I remember just taking a moment to just thank the deer and be like, thank you for your life, so that I can, eat, good, clean.
You can live.
I can live, your death is my life. And so, I took that time and then came the part where I had to get my hands dirty and take responsibility and, take the guts out. And I remember making the mistake of cutting the intestines open.
Oh, yeah.
And like the gases and everything just like exploded all over me. All the like poop came out and I was like, all right, this is awesome. And it just smelled horribly. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But and then we went and we got it out, we hung it, and then it came time to butcher it. Yeah. So I remember you showing me how to butcher it and just having like that was like the first time where I was like, oh my God, like this is really disgusting and kind of cool. But at the same time, it was like, for me, it was like an existential crisis because I just remember thinking like, I am no more than this, physically. And I was like, I don't know, like getting inside of another body and taking it apart. I was like, wow, like I am just as fragile and could be as easily taken apart as this.
Right.
And so it was like this, like almost like, this existential, like, wow, life is fragile.
Right.
And
it puts you into perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you're at in this world, who you are as a human.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm, here I am at that point, 27, 28, and, through your 20s, you usually think you're invincible. I'm on top of the world, but it's like, oh shit, I'm nothing. Right. Like I'm just a bag of meat, And so that point on, like, I think I hunted the next year.
Yeah, you took a break.
I took a break. I hunted like maybe one more year,
this
but I didn't.
Lasted a long time for you.
It did. 5 years, I think.
Gosh.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a mix of factors, but
you went a couple.
I half-heartedly hunted. Yeah.
You went a couple times, but I remember it being very not serious.
Yeah,
because
it was half-hearted for sure. Because it was like, do I want to do that again?
Yeah, and I'll tell you the story. This is probably the second time you've ever seen me really mad hunting, is with your bull. Ben had a very special bull elk tag, and it was the same year. So you'd already gotten that deer, but you were probably still having this, like, I don't know if I like this or not type of crisis or whatever was going on in your mind.
Yeah.
But you had this really amazing bull tag that I was shocked you got your first year. And
that's because they know I'm a beginner. He's not going to get anything. Give it to him.
Right. First, it was the first day of the season. It was a Saturday, and there was a shitload of people out there. And I remember all the spots we tried to drive to, they were all taken. Like there was people
Trucks
already
everywhere.
parked there. Yeah. And so I thought, we're going to hunt way lower than all these guys. Like they're going to scare everything down low. And so we ended up hunting super low in some of the more flat areas. We still had to hike up a mountain, but it was a pretty easy hike. And sure enough, like after the first ridge, maybe second ridge, there's a whole herd of elk there. And I look at you and I'm like, get down, there's going to be a bull. And you looked at me and you're like, I'll get down when I see a bull. And I'm like, no, get down on your rifle.
I was like, no, get ready to shoot.
I was like, get down on your rifle. Because the elk, they must have winded us because they weren't spooked, but they were moving pretty quick out of that canyon.
Right.
And it was maybe 120 yards. And on an elk, it's impossible to miss at 120 yards unless your gun's real messed up. And I kept saying, the bull's going to be at the end. The bull's going to be at the end, because you couldn't quite see the entire herd. And you were just standing up, like just looking at the herd. And I'm like, get down. And you're like, I don't want to see a bull. And like, it was this moment of like, do what I say. And then this bull comes out, and he was a huge bull, but he was missing.
He was missing an antler.
He was missing an entire antler. It had broken off during the rut. And I was like, Ben, this is still a huge bull. Like, take it, and then we'll try to find the antler. That was my thought. And still, you were like not getting down on your rifle. And then the bull ran up and over the ridge, and I was like, okay, I guess we're leaving. And we hiked down, and then you didn't hunt for a long time after that.
Yeah.
And yeah, what was going through your mind during those years?
I mean, a lot of it, I mean, this is probably all just excuse, to be honest, but
sure.
It's
hard work.
It's hard work for sure. Because like, you were always putting in the time preseason to scout and, find the animal. And, after having kids, it really got hard for me, and just trying to manage family life and things like that. Like,
I understand that now.
Yeah. And having that, like, be an extra thing that took a lot of my time. so it was kind of like, I didn't get it, like I just didn't get the time to put into it this year, And I think always in the subconscious, it was always like, I don't know if I'm ready,
right?
To go back and do that again, because it was such a traumatic event,
right,
for me, just just a reckoning of like, you're not invincible, you're not immortal,
right.
And I don't know if I knew how to like even process that.
Totally. And most people who grow up hunting experience that at such a young age that they get used to it and they understand that's how life is.
Right.
They understand it. But you experienced it way later than most people would, I think. And so there is that existential crisis of who am I? Can I handle this emotional burden again?
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. And then I don't remember what really started that passion, like that fire to like start hunting again. I think it was after, when did I start? It was like 2 years ago.
I feel like it was after you started doing a ton of research on meat.
Yeah. It was like,
it seemed like you were getting more.
Wasn't even really at that point. It wasn't even really the meat, but it was more like, because like I had that experience, and I realized the value I got from that deer and that meat, and just also realizing like, wow, here I am. I've gone my whole life, and I've had food and everything I've needed at my fingertips, and then I started learning a lot more about like nutrition and agriculture and like, the meat that we get at the grocery store, you don't necessarily know where it's coming from. And then you see all these, where they come from, like factory farms and things, and you see how these animals are treated and the life that they live. And like, it's just kind of disgusting. You're like, why would I want to eat that?
Right.
Like if I
can get this myself.
Right. Like they're just sitting in like, they're confined and they're peeing and they're pooping where they're eating. And it's like, that's going in their body. And you're like,
right.
And they're not being fed a species appropriate diet. So it's like, okay, after all these times of learning, it's like, okay, you know what? I need to kind of reckon with what I've been avoiding, and grow up and take responsibility for my life and my health and my family's, and be able to provide so that we know exactly where our food is coming from. It's coming from nature, and it's not denatured in any way, and it's not causing more problems because we're just trying to mass produce a bunch of food. And I think like a lot of people, like because of that, most of society is so disconnected from where their food even comes from. Like growing up, it's like you eat a steak, but it's like, do you really like think like, oh, this is a cow?
No.
Or like you eat a chicken breast and you don't think this is a chicken,
Right.
It's like my daughter, like this, I think it was this year, she's like, so what kind of meat what kind of meat does chicken come from? I said, well, it comes from a chicken.
Yep.
And we had chickens at this point, And she's like, wait a minute, like you mean like our chickens? I was like, yep. She's like, oh, cool. But at that point, it was like when I had got my second deer last year, I was like, you guys, they was hanging up. We were hanging it. We were skinning. I was like, bring the kids over. I want to show them my deer that I got. Because I had been talking about, I was like, Dad's going hunting. I'm going to get a deer so that way we can, have meat in the freezer. And so they came over and they saw the deer gutted out, hanging there. We were peeling the skin off, and they were kind of like, that's the deer. Like they're just looking at it. And I don't know what they thought, but they're kind of like weirded out.
Yep.
But I was like, yeah, here's the deer, like showed its head. And, it's like, this was the thing, like, not in like a grotesque or like,
right.
Yeah,
not trying to like freak him out.
Right. But like, hey, here's the deer that I, caught. Cause I wanted them to kind of be part of the process.
Right.
And we always talked about like, once we got in the freezer, it was like, all right, we're having, and then Parker would just like, oh, is this your deer? I'm like, yep, this is the deer. He's like, what part of it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, this is the shoulder or something, or the tenderloin, you know,
Right.
trying to teach them like the different things. And, you know, I was like, oh, today we're cooking up the tongue, you know, because at this point I was like really like learning about like eating nose to tail and like using as much of the animal so nothing goes to waste as much as possible.
Right.
You know, and so I was like, okay, I'll take the tongue, take the heart. I took the liver. Unfortunately, I kept the liver in the freezer for a year because I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm scared to eat this.
Liver's not good. I mean, I always give my liver away because people really do love it.
Yeah.
And I know you probably have figured out how to eat it now.
Yeah.
But gosh, I cannot figure out how to cook a liver to save my life. And maybe it's just I hate the texture of it.
Oh, the texture is the worst part.
I can't get over it.
Yeah. But unfortunately, that liver went to waste because when we moved into the RV, I had it in there, and then we were plugged into the house, and the lawnmowers came, and they didn't plug it back in all the way, and we were out of town, so the freezer unthawed, and like we had a bunch of meat in there that went to waste. I was so mad.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, just really wanted to be part of that process, and I think learning about all these things, you know, as far as just like nutritionally, like, oh wow, like organ meats are really good for you. They're super nutrient dense, you know, and you can't really go to a grocery store and find a heart or a liver usually. I mean, you can probably ask for it because that's a little more common. People feed it to their dogs and stuff, but
do you?
But
really
people don't
want
think
a liver
about
from
it.
mass-produced,
right? Exactly.
Cow? No.
Yeah, and, you know, unless you know, like, you know, and that's where I'm like, if I'm not hunting and I want to, and the source meat, I want to get it from a source that I know, that I've talked to the farmer or the rancher or whoever's getting it, you know, and I've seen how the cows are being treated. I know what their diet is. You know, I know that they have as much of a natural life grazing and pasturing.
Right. Shout out to like Buck Wild Beef.
Yeah, exactly. I just bought like 30 pounds of meat from him.
That's awesome. Buck Wild Beef.
And it was,
they do zero, they don't even do penicillin for
no
their
antibiotics,
cows.
no hormones,
No needles. It's pretty much like eating what you could call
only
day,
grass fed.
Yeah. Modern day cow, but it even has like a tiny bit of a hint of like a deer or an elk taste.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
From the gaminess of it, because it doesn't have any of the crap in it. And it's a really lean meat compared to a super fatty meat. And it tastes frickin' delicious. So
it's really good.
Shout out to buckwildbeef.com. Go to buckwildbeef.com for your beef today.
For all your beef needs.
But if you don't get your animal, if you don't get your deer or your elk, definitely hit up Buck Wild Beef. They're awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did this year. It was funny because I just went in the freezer and I was like, "Ooh, I'll take this and this and this." And he's like, "You just want to load up a box?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then by the time I was like, "Oh wow, that's a big box." I was like, "Okay, I guess I'll spend that amount of money." But I mean, we need meat, so
yeah, totally.
It's like I'm gonna spend this money on food anyway. Might as well spend it on good food.
Right. Well, and what's nice about, like, if you go to these places and build relationships with these places, you're probably the only person who's coming for things like the liver, the heart.
Oh yeah, that's what he said. He's like, this is what I was telling a buddy of mine. He's like, yeah, this guy wants liver and heart. And he's like, you need more guys like that. He's had a ton of liver, you know, and liver is actually pretty cheap because no one wants it.
Yeah.
So like, I kind of don't want to tell people about liver because then they'll go up in price, you know, supply and demand. Well,
luckily you can have all the liver I ever obtained because gross.
Yeah.
But everything else.
So I tried it. So finally I got fresh liver because I was like, okay, I take desiccated liver pills and I feel amazing because it's just like, for me, it's not about like the taste. It's just like, this is nutrients. This is like just making me feel good and awesome. And so I was like, okay, if I can get some fresh liver, because it's a little more expensive that way to eat it in the pill form. If I can get some fresh liver for cheap, you know, then I can eat a little bit more and not have to spend as much.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I've seen a lot of people I follow, they just eat it raw. So I was like, all right, I'll try it.
Oh.
So I just cut a little chunk and I put it in my mouth and I was like, I'm going to try it. And then I just chewed it and it was a very metallic-y taste because it's, you know, it's full of minerals and selenium, copper, and zinc. And, you know, and it was like, oh, this is kind of metallic-y, but it wasn't like so strong. But it wasn't the flavor that got me. It was the texture. Like, trying to chew it, especially raw, I think it just was like, And the more I just thought about it in my mouth, my body was like, nope.
Gosh.
And so it's kind of scarred from that first attempt. So I tried to figure out other ways to get it in. So now I just cut into little like swallowable pills, and then I just put it in my mouth and take a swig of raw milk, and it just goes right down. Yeah. But I only take eat like an ounce, like 2 to 3 ounces a week,
What's the reasoning behind not cooking it?
When you cook it, it just breaks down a lot of the enzymes and the proteins and the nutrients in it. Mm-hmm. So you don't get the 100%,
Gotcha.
So it's like I might as well get everything out of it.
So maybe for people who
you can
don't have a ton of game meat and are on a budget, they can still get some of the nutrient density by eating this type of stuff.
Yeah,
more raw than fully cooked.
Yeah, and I
do not condone that for anyone who gets sick eating freaking raw liver.
I have not gotten sick.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I actually feel amazing.
In the there's not a lot of modern day places that eat a lot of raw meat, especially in the United States. Or raw organs, I should say. But a delicacy in the Midwest is this food called cannibal sandwich. And it's usually where people take, either in grass-fed beef or white-tailed deer, they take a back strap with no added cow fat or anything like that. They take just the really lean cut back strap, grind it up into a burger, and that's it. It's literally a plate. Excuse me.
And it's raw.
It's raw. And it's a plate of just a mound of burger, which
from the backstrap.
Yeah. It's the only place I've ever seen it is different places in the Midwest. And they take a cracker, they take a spoonful of the meat, put it on the cracker, put a couple slices of onion.
Put your pinky out.
Pinky out. A couple slices of onion and a little salt and pepper, and they eat it. And everyone does it. No one even questions it. They all love it. And then when I talk about it to other people, they think it's disgusting. Whenever I go to the Midwest, I request cannibal sandwiches. I have no idea why they're so good. But
it actually sounds really good.
Oh, it's amazing. This year I've decided I'm going to actually try to make it. I wonder if there's a part of me that thinks they must.
I wonder why they call it a cannibal sandwich. Though.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
That's what kind of puts people off.
Yeah,
I think.
Totally. They call it other things.
What is this?
They call it other things. That's just in my particular family. That's what they call it. Okay. I know they call it other things. Is your family deer? But yeah, so it's usually at Christmases, like really fancy dinners that you want to elevate your food. People do that. And it's expensive to get just a cut of backstrap grinded up like that. So they don't do it all the time. But I'm going to try it this year.
Try it.
See how it goes. Because I do love it every time I eat it. I've just never prepared it myself. I don't know. I'll have to do some research. I don't know if they cure it in any way beforehand. Like, I don't know if it's rinsed in salt or anything weird like that. My thought is, to be safe, if you took frozen meat and then did the process after it was frozen, you've probably killed most of any bacteria, especially if you're doing cow. I would trust a white-tailed deer more than I would trust cow. Yeah. But that might be the safer route for me to go. So I'll give it a shot. Yeah. Let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I'd love to try it if I'm around. No, I should try it making it myself. But yeah, I've kind of slowly eased into the whole raw thing because I see a lot of people doing it and done some research on just how cooking kind of destroys the nutrients a little bit and breaks down the enzymes that are inherent in the meat that help you actually break down the food.
Right.
Not that it's bad to cook it or anything, but I've kind of done steaks where I've seared the outsides really good and then just quickly and then left the inside very, very rare.
Right.
And then kind of slowly try to even raw on the inside. Mm-hmm. And then the other day I actually just took a raw steak and took a bite out of it because I might as well try it. And it wasn't it's not bad. It tastes like meat.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have the flavor of the butter and the oils that get cooked onto the outside.
Yeah. I do it to freak people out primarily. Yeah. This year when we were butchering my deer, Levi was with me and he goes, "Look at this," and put it up close to my face, and I just bit it out of his hand in front of his wife and my wife, and they were all like, "Ew."
Should just like
it's such clean meat.
Yeah.
But I didn't. It's not like I loved the flavor.
Right.
But I'm with you. What my go-to method of cooking is super hot cast iron skillet. And I put a giant chunk usually of backstrap, especially if I'm cooking for more than one person. And I sear every single edge, make sure I have a nice crisp to it. And of course it's seasoned, salt and pepper, usually some sort of dry rub. And it's pretty raw in the middle most of the time. And if you weren't looking at it, you wouldn't even know. To me, as long as it's just cooked along the edges, it's going to taste good.
Yeah. I think there's something that helps with that. Like if you keep it raw in the center, but then like searing it, like it helps bring all the juices and the flavor out. So it helps a lot more. And then it also kind of tenderizes it. So it's not like super chewy. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I follow this guy on Instagram now. He made an account called the Raw Meat Experience, and he was just doing it as like a meme, basically. But he was like, his whole thing was, I'm going to eat raw meat every day outside of Whole Foods for 30 days or until I die of bacteria. Or something like that. And now he's on like day 35 or somewhere in there, and he's just eating all kinds of different raw meat.
Gosh, weird.
I know. And he's like, I feel great.
Yeah.
And the last one I saw, he was wearing a shirt that said, I'm not dead yet.
That's funny. It's weird because civilization, humanity most animals, when they eat their food, digestion starts at the mouth.
Right.
Humans, digestion usually starts with the hands. It's the way that we prepared it. It's the way that we cooked it beforehand. So I know that there's a correlation of evolution from humans starting to cook foods and our systems changing so that we have a single chamber stomach that can handle cooked foods really well, but can't handle raw foods as well. I don't know your thoughts on that. But I've always thought of my digestion starts at the preparation that I'm doing with my hands first.
Are you saying we had multiple stomachs?
Well,
previously,
evolution would say yes. Like you started
I've never heard that.
Well, humans never did, but you were an animal before you were a human, according to evolution.
Right.
And so you probably started off with multiple chamber stomachs like cows, horses. That's why they can handle the nutritional density of grass.
Yeah.
And then you evolve into primates and you evolve into humans. And the more that you're able to prep food with your hands first, the less your stomach needs to be able to handle as much needs to be able to handle the nutrient dense vegetation. And so your system can't process it like a cow can or a deer can.
Right.
Supposedly. So that's where I always think of, that's where digestion starts for me, is the way it's prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've been doing a lot of like reading just about it, just out of curiosity. I did hear, like, not with the cooking thing, but just with when humans transition to actually starting to eat meat, that's when we like had a huge jump in our evolution, not necessarily cooking it, but just like actually adding meat into the diet. But I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is probably just conjecture or hearsay because
you don't know.
We weren't there. Yeah. And so it's like, we're just guessing at this point.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
Tell me about your, we have two more stories that I can think of. One is the last deer that you shot. So we had this big gap between deer 1 and deer 2. Tell me a little bit about the hunt for deer 2.
Yeah. I remember. Oh yeah. So it was after my first year of archery for elk. Actually,
you were fired up.
I have to tell that story.
Okay, that was one of the stories. I couldn't remember which one came first.
So it was archery elk season first, September, and then deer was October. So Yeah. So it was after, so that was my first year back hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, I had bought your old bow, years ago.
Yeah. You'd had it for a while.
It kept putting it off because it was a lot of financial. Like every year I'd be like, I'm sure I could have did it, but it was like an excuse of like, oh, I don't know if I can afford it this year to get it like set up. And it was stupid because it only ended up being like $200 to get everything I needed.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, sweet. I did it, And then, so yeah, I remember after, learning all this stuff and really wanting to take responsibility for my food, and ready to get back into it. I was like, okay, I'm going to do archery this year for elk because I think that feels a lot more traditional and kind of, down to the roots of hunting. So I was like, okay, this will be fun. It's a little more exciting. You call in the elk, you try to get them closer, you try to outsmart them. And that was an amazing experience. Like, I forget, I don't know how many years have you been to archery?
I've been archery hunting for on and off because sometimes I get controlled hunt tags for rifle that I apply for. But I think I've had 7 or 8 solid years now of archery. Okay. And I've only gotten one elk with a bow since for 8 years.
Right. So, yeah. So you've been on that for, that long, and you've been like, you got to do this. It's, and I've actually gone with you a couple times on an archery hunt. And of course, whenever I went, we never actually saw anything.
Right.
So that didn't really help. But yeah, so I got fired up for doing archery, and it was just, it was a really hot year that year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a year, for those who don't know, a lot of times the rut, especially when the elk are in high pressured areas, the elk they may go into rut, but they're quiet.
Right.
And they don't start vocalizing usually until it starts getting a little colder. And we had a super hot season that year. And it seemed like all the elk were waiting until the very end before they were going to start vocalizing.
Yeah. So the beginning of the season was very hot. And then I think we took a, big break in the middle of it because we're like, and then I think you went antelope hunting. And then, toward the end we went again. And yeah, just trying to find the deer was or the elk, it was kind of disappointing because you're like, geez, like where are all these things horrible. At, like they got to be out here somewhere. And I remember we were sitting on this ridge looking out over this canyon, and it was kind of just like in the middle of the day at this point, we're like, I don't know, probably not going to see anything, but every once in a while looking through the binoculars, and I didn't even have binoculars at this point. I was just looking through your rangefinder. Because I don't have my own gear, but so I was looking through the rangefinder, and then like just happened to catch the butt end of an elk, and I was like, "Whoa!" And it like went behind a tree. I was like, "Dude, I just saw a big elk down there," and obviously this is like 500, 600, maybe 800 yards away. Nothing that we could get to.
Right.
But we marked it. We kind of we saw it for a little while, like kind of just making its way through the trees, and then I think it was 2 days later, or maybe the next day, we're like, oh, let's go. We went back, but we came up at a different spot.
Yep.
So we're like, okay, let's come up over this ridge.
A
little lower, kind of where it was headed though.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Cause we saw it heading down this way. So we decided to come up this way. And then I remember we were being super quiet. We were being super slow. And then we got to the top of the ridge and hear a big crash right in front of us. Right. Like it was so close, like maybe 30 yards, down the other side of this ridge, and just like running away. And we're like, oh, and then you got out the bugle really quick, or the cow calls. Yeah. Started cow calling first, and then it stopped. And then I think you did bugle that time. Did we? And we got a bugle. A bugle back. So like, oh, there's a bull there. Yeah. And then I remember just getting ready, setting up, but it never came out. And then it was the next day, evening hunt. Last day of the season. We're like, let's go into that canyon from the bottom this time.
Wind should have been right.
Yeah, the wind was
blowing right in our face the whole time.
And it was perfect. And I remember it was like out of a movie, because we walked, first of all, like we didn't really know that area because we'd never gone that way before. And so we had to find our way through this Willows Creek. And it was like, trying to figure out how to get through that. But once we got through there, I was like, okay, here we are. Here's the canyon. And we walk through, and then immediately we see deer up here on the left side, and they run through. And then, or they ran off this way where we couldn't see them. And then I think we went a little bit further and then saw them again. And we figured they must have been the same deer. And then as we're going through and like looking up and like we see a fox running through, we're like, whoa, look, there's a fox. We're like, man, this is special.
It was like that canyon still is, it feels like a mystical canyon because every time you go in it, you're seeing animals all over the place.
Right.
And they're just all jam packed into this one canyon. And it's probably because
no they're getting,
they're getting pressure on all the sides. It's not an easy canyon to get into. You have to go through.
It's very thick.
It's very thick shrubbery that you're trying to get through. But once you get through it, it's an easy hiking canyon.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's a human trail in there.
Yeah, but it's hard you don't know how to get to it.
You don't know how to get to it. Yeah. So anyway, so we go up a little bit, and then I think are maybe like 20 yards behind me, and you're like start bugling, or you start doing some cow calls. 'Cause at this point, I'm not good at calls. I have like the little hoochie mama thing that I'm always scared to use because I'm like, how many times do I do this?
Right.
Like, I don't want them to, realize I'm not an elk.
Right. What if I screw it up?
What if I screw it up? Yeah. What if I say run instead of come here? So you're doing the cow calls and then bugling, and then finally, like, I don't know, 20 minutes of just sitting there waiting. We hear a bugle, and I'm like, yes, he's in here. He's still in here.
He was at the very back of that canyon when he started.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And then he may have bugled maybe one more time.
Yeah.
And then, so we're sitting there looking, and all of a sudden, like, he's off to the, in front of us where we were heading down this canyon. And then I'm sitting there up the canyon walls behind me. And then like across, there's the other one. And then all of a sudden up there, I hear like rocks falling down.
Yep.
And then
I hiked through just a small section of shale that was up there.
Yeah.
And so you could hear him for a second.
So I heard him and I was like, what the heck is that? So he went from way over here to all of a sudden here.
Instantly.
And like, it seemed like instantly without making a sound. Made a mistake of walking on some loose rocks. And then I was like looking, and then like happened to see him pass from tree to tree, like really quick. I'm like, how the hell is he right here? And then he comes down again, like heading this way. And I'm like, that bastard's trying to get behind us,
Trying
like,
to
and
get
the
downwind.
trying to get downwind. So I remember just being like, oh, what do we do? Like, and I was thinking like, what if, I think you said like, let's quickly like scooch back and, go where he's going. 'Cause he can't see us. It's so thick in here. So we quickly go and, we're kind of like looking out for him, seeing where he is. And I think
eventually got to the point where I was calling from one spot, hoping that he would continue to try to skirt downwind of us. And so I was like, you get to where you think he might try to cross, because you could hear him. And as long as you could hear him and without him seeing us, you should be fine.
Yeah.
But he just continually kept moving farther and farther down, trying to get downwind. And you were trying to skirt downwind with him.
And so, there was a big bush down the bottom of this gully. And you stayed at like this log and were calling. And then we're scooting around. And at this point, I had no experience with this. So I was like, how much noise can I make? How fast can I go? Like, do I just have to be really quiet and sneaky? And so like, I'm just trying to get around this bush. And then all of a sudden I see him there almost to the bottom, 40 yards from me, and he's just looking over kind of still. And I'm like, I froze. It was like, okay. And then he just kind of turns around, starts walking back up the hill. And so I was like, dude.
He knew something was off.
He knew something was
but he
off.
didn't know you were that close, probably.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have spooked.
Yeah.
But he knew something's not quite right. And so I'm just going to go back up the mountain.
Yep. And so I was like, I looked at the clock. I knew it was like 10 minutes till we can't shoot anymore. The sun's going down. So I was like, can I swear?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've already swore.
I know. I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
So I look at the clock. it's 10 minutes to sundown where we can't shoot anymore. So I was like, fuck it. This is my last chance to do anything. I'm just going to go Rambo on it. So I like put this elk call in my mouth that I had no idea how to use, because at this point it sounded like a dead cat or a dying cat. And then I just was like up the mountain, you know, and I was like, I'm just going to run after him up this mountain and try to get a shot on him.
Yep.
And I just put my whole like energy focus into running straight up a mountain. And I was just like, oh, and I would stop and I would see him and he'd turn around and be like, what the hell is that? And I'd stop, try not to, you know, and I'd be like, and he'd be like, whatever. And then like slowly run up walk up the mountain. He never ran.
Yep.
And I was like, okay. And then he eventually like went over this little thing where he wouldn't be able to look down and see me anymore. It's like, okay, this might be my chance. Book it up there. And then I got up to the top and he's gone. And then I look to my right, I hear a sound and I see him like basically like go off back to where he had come from, but just into the thick bushes. And then at that point I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Can't keep up with him. Even he's walking.
Yeah. And he's just walking. And I'm like, how?
I mean, think of how many miles on weird terrain he covered in seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. But I was like, if I don't just put everything into this right now, then it will be like the worst story ever. You know, it'll be like the worst end to like, I at least got to try.
Right.
Like I knew there was probably like a 1% chance I'd even get a shot. But I was like, I just got to try.
Yep.
Like, because I'll look back on this and be like, why didn't I try? Like, because then at that point you're just like, what if I did get a shot?
Right.
But I didn't try.
Yeah. No, and that's a good life lesson in general, but it's a really good hunting lesson, because most of the time you don't get these picture perfect moments unless you've put in the energy beforehand. And so oftentimes it is that extra effort. It's that extra, I'm going to go one more ridge.
Right.
I'm going to, you know, go one more mile, whatever it is. It's always the time where you're like so down and you decide I'm going to take another step, is usually when you end up having success. And so it's a good lesson. And from my perspective, I was calling, I had no idea what happened. I just could hear him moving. And I think I saw him briefly at around 80 yards from me. So probably, 40 yards from you. And then I knew that he started going back up. I had no idea what happened to you. So I just started going down and I'm like, where the hell did Ben go? And you came back and I thought you were going to come back super disappointed and sad. And you came back with like vigor. Yeah. You were like, that was the best ever. I got so close. Well, you know, like, and I was like, okay, great. And it kind of set you up for the next year, because the next year you were fired up, ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I was just grateful for the experience. Like most people just don't even make the effort to go on a hike, you know, let alone go hunting and like chase deer through the mountains. Like, you know, like I chased an elk up a mountain. Like who does that?
Right. Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, it was just fun.
Yeah. And it said, I feel like, and so that was the same year, because then deer season started.
Deer season
10 days after that.
Yeah.
And how many days were we in before you got your deer?
It was the second day.
Second day.
Yeah, because we went out opening day. Didn't see anything. I don't remember where we went.
Yeah, I don't either.
On opening day. But then we went up to another spot where it was freezing cold.
And it was
actually fine in the morning. Like we went up, we hiked. I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be an awesome day. Yeah. Like I'm taking my gloves off and my hat. And then we went up and sat at the top of this ridge. And, you know, we got up there maybe 7:00.
Yeah.
Maybe even
so
earlier.
I think the sun rises right around 6:45 in that area.
And so we sat there, and then maybe after an hour, you were like, oh, I'm going to go over here. You stay here and keep an eye on this ridge. I'll look at that ridge. I was like, okay. And then it just keeps getting colder and colder. The wind comes up. It gets cloudy, starting to get dark. And I'm sitting there like shivering, like I'm trying to hide behind a tree from the wind, you know? And it was like, I'm just at that point where I'm like, I think I'm ready to go home. Like, I don't like this,
Yep.
you know, and I'm just trying to stay warm. And then you called me and you're like, whispering, you know, like, hey, I just saw a herd of deer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see any bucks in there, but they're headed your way. So just keep an eye out for them. And I was like, okay. And that thought kind of like warmed me up a little bit. I was like, oh, maybe there'll be something here. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting. It took probably, I don't know, 20 minutes before they actually came into my view. And so and they were 150 yards, I think, maybe 200 from where I was. And I saw them in between these two big pine trees. And then after that, there was like a field. So they were down in that field, a little meadow. And so I started scoping just so I could see what was in there. And there was two little bucks, two little forkies. So I was like, oh, awesome. And so I'm like, okay, I want to get, again, same gun, same confidence. I'm like, I want to get a little bit closer, as close as I can get.
Yeah.
And I honestly probably shouldn't be saying this, but I don't think, I sighted in my rifle like once, you know, before we went out. Because I was like, just make sure. But that gun has always been just like really good at consistent.
It's weird how those old guns are.
Yeah.
Old guns, old scopes, you shoot them for so many years and it seems like they settle and they do not move.
Right. And and one of the big reasons I don't like to shoot far is because that scope doesn't actually zoom in very far.
Right.
So it's like you don't really get a good view. But yeah, it's always been very consistent. And so I'm like, I'm pretty confident in it. But I still want to get as close as I can. So I slowly start sneaking down the hill as I'm watching them, and they have no idea I'm there. Like I'm upwind. What do you want to be?
You're upwind.
Yeah, I'm upwind, and they can't hear me because it's actually pretty windy.
Wait, are you downwind?
No,
you're downwind.
Yeah, downwind.
You're down. What?
No, upwind, because the wind is coming this way, which means you're up.
Yeah.
Just like
I don't know.
upstream
Either way,
and downstream.
The wind was blowing in your face.
The wind was blowing in my favor, yes. And it was blowing hard, so it was rattling the trees and covering up a lot of my sound that I was making.
See, look at how much you learned in those years. Like you knew everything.
Yeah, everything. Anyway, so I snuck down, and then I got about as close as I could when I saw this little buck eating grass behind, and he was just behind a bush. So I was like, okay, I'm going to set up here and I'll wait for him. And he was perfectly broadside to me. All I needed was him to walk out from behind this bush. And that's exactly what happened. And so I was like, put my sights right where I wanted it, took the shot. And this time, instead of dropping immediately, he sprung up really fast, ran like 20, 30 feet, and then dropped. And then that was it. And I'm looking, and yeah, he's not moving. He twitched a little bit. You know, I was like, oh, is he going to get up? And it kind of looked like, he did drop a little bit and then got up and ran again. And so I was like, oh man, like hopefully he doesn't like last too long in that state. And you know, so I got ready to shoot again just in case he was going to get up and, you know, kind of be like, what just happened?
Right.
And then, I waited, and he finally gave up and dropped, and I waited there a little bit, just watching him. And then you called me and were like, was that you? Like surprised, you know, and like,
cause I saw this herd of doe, and I knew that there was a herd of doe, but it's funny because my phone call to you was more to warn you that doe are coming through, and you should be on the lookout for doe, because I didn't want you to shoot, you know, like I just didn't know. We hadn't hunted for so long with rifles for a while. And so I just didn't know, you know, where your hunting level was at. And it was more warning you, like, don't shoot any of these deer that are probably going to pop up right on top of you. And there were no bucks in the herd that I saw. So when you shot a buck and I called, and I'm like, did you shoot?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I was shocked. I was like, there were no bucks in that herd. So
there was two.
They must have. I don't know if I have a feeling what happened is those doe came around the mountain and bumped those bucks. That's my thought. Maybe. But I don't know.
So and then we went down there, and I had a moment with the deer again, and you know, it was that same heavy feeling, but it was a little more like, okay, this is the way of like this
life.
This is the way.
Yeah.
like the Mandalorian says. But yeah, like it just felt, it's hard. It's indescribable because it's like you have that remorse of like, damn, I wish this wasn't the way life was.
Right.
But for some reason it is. And I'm gonna do my best to participate and you know, do my role. And okay, if I have to take life in order to, you know, if death is required for life, then it's like where, you know, I'm gonna honor that and like not waste it. Let's not waste this life. Let's honor it. Let's eat as much. And that's where the, you know, eating nose to tail comes from. It's like eat the tongue, eat the heart, eat the liver, you know, leave the rest for the wolves.
Give the liver to your friends.
Yeah, give the liver to your friends.
Don't leave it out there.
Yeah. You know, some of the other organs, you know, leave it for the wolves.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just, it's a whole new experience for me now. And it's like, it's a good experience, you know, even though it's not like, yeah, let's just go kill everything we can. You know, it's like, take what you need and only what you need.
Right.
And then when you need more, you can go take more.
Right.
You know, and honor that. And then, you know, any excess that you have, you share it. You know, that way nothing goes to waste.
Right. And that's the amazing thing about living in a state that we do, is there's a lot of states that you can hunt, but most of the time it feels like you need some sort of private land or you're on top of people hunting on public land because there's not enough of it. And in Idaho, there is so much public land.
Yeah.
There's not enough for anyone else to move here, so stay away.
Right.
But that's the amazing thing is literally when you run out of meat, and I tell Amory this all the time, if I don't get a deer or an elk and we run out of meat, I can go get a rabbit. I can go catch fish.
Right.
There's so many opportunities for me to figure out how to get meat into our home from the wild that a lot of other states offer, but oftentimes you are traveling a long distance.
Right. Yeah, it's very difficult to.
Here it's in your backyard.
Yeah.
Or front yard.
Which is really awesome.
Yeah. So it's sad that you're going to Texas.
I know.
There's
a lot of bittersweet. Well,
There's tons of places to hunt.
Coming
in
back
Texas.
here to hunt elk for sure.
That's good.
Yeah. Even though I'll probably keep my residency here so I don't have to pay out of state tax.
Right. I would try to.
Yeah.
So what's the future look like for you as far as hunting goes? Is this something now that you put as a priority to try to get an elk or a deer for sustenance for the year? What's the future look like for you for hunting and fishing?
Yeah.
Mainly hunting.
Mainly hunting, yeah. I'm not a big fisherman. I do enjoy it every once in a while, but I don't know. It's never like grabbed me.
Yeah.
You know?
You don't eat a lot of fish anyways.
Yeah. I don't love the taste of fish, but
gosh, maybe we should get you back into fishing.
Maybe.
Because I figured out how to make trout now that tastes so freaking good. It's unbelievable. Doesn't even
only God makes trout. You just cook it.
I know how to cook trout now that tastes unbelievable. Most of the time when I cook it, it tastes like trout. It's not nearly the quality of salmon. And oftentimes trout has a lot of bones in it. It's greasy.
Yeah.
It's funny saying this, growing up in Idaho, people go to restaurants and order trout, but I'm so used to eating trout that I got just real bored of it. Now I know how to cook it so freaking good. So maybe I have to show you.
Is that what you're making me tonight?
Maybe. Oh. You never know. Never know.
Oh, set's falling over. What was your question?
The
future
What's
of hunting.
the future for hunting look like for you? I know that you're going to be going to a different state, but you plan on traveling back here.
There's no.
What's the priority as far as getting meat for you now?
Yeah. I've cattle ranches and, just there's a lot of that not available in Texas. So it's like just getting connected that way. And I know there's deer, like I think whitetail.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of,
Texas has got phenomenal hunting.
Right.
If you know where to go.
Yeah. So it won't be easy at first, but maybe, can make some connections with some big private landowners. I don't know.
And then call me.
Yeah.
Come down. There's great public land in Texas as well.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of boar hunting too. So that could be fun.
Yep.
But yeah, I do plan on coming back to Idaho in September for the archery elk season because I have to get that elk that I chased after. That's just my goal.
Even if it's not the same elk, it's going to be the same elk.
Oh, it'll be the same elk. That's him. I know it.
He'll be freaking massive if you shoot him now. Or
no, he's just hiding out in there.
Digressing. Yeah.
Degressing, yeah. De-evolving, devolving. But no, yeah, I want to come. I'm actually, I really want to learn this year everything I can about elk hunting and like, and archery mainly. Just different techniques and strategies. So I'm going to be taking the Corey Jacobson's online elk university or whatever it is from Elk 101.
Cool. Just
so I get I want to be prepared because the last 2 years I did it. It was, kind of just like what I've learned from you, which was a lot. But, I just want to be thoroughly from people who've shot more than one elk.
Totally. I have a shitload to learn about archery hunting.
Oh yeah.
I'm the first to admit that. Mule deer with rifle, I know what I'm doing. Archery with elk, to me, it's like whatever meat I can get out of that, I will take it.
Right.
But it's not one of those things I've mastered yet.
Yeah. So yeah, hunting I think will definitely be, every year that I can, I'm going to make it a priority to make sure that it happens on some level, especially after this year because we moved to Boise, which is 2 hours away from here. And I realized it became a lot harder to actually hunt, you know, and I wasn't expecting it because, I really wanted to be able to come up here and, for the season, or, at least a lot longer than I did. I got a handful of days this year, but I didn't get anything with the elk. And then with deer, I hunted closer to where I was living, completely unknown to me. And it was actually, I didn't get anything, but it was honestly a blast because I took my son, who is 7 years old, and I honestly did not expect him to go with me as much as he did. Like the opening day, I was like, at first I wasn't going to take him, but I was like, hey, Parker, you want to go with me? I just asked it, threw him out there, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll go hunting.
That's awesome.
And I was like, okay, we'll probably just drive and, glass the mountainside and see if we see anything, just a road scout. And then we got out there and was like, let's go for a little hike. Let's see. And then we ended up going 4 miles that day, I think, up and around the mountains. And we saw deer and, was able to glass him like, hey, look, there's deer there. And then he's like, should we go try to get closer to them? He's like, yeah, let's go. I was like, okay. I was like, the whole time I was just kind of dependent on what he wanted to do.
Right.
And so anyway, so we went and we actually went around the mountain and we saw the deer again. I was like, oh, wow, I actually did that.
Yeah. Right.
I saw the deer and I mapped out where they were and I was like, okay, if we're good and we're quiet, they're kind of heading up this way. They might go over that ridge and bed down. And sure enough, pretty much exactly where I thought they would be. They bedded down. Right. And we got 200 yards from them when they spooked up from us making too much noise. And we weren't really being loud either. We were just, just
That's
walking.
Just how it is.
It's just how it is. And I was like, and I didn't even think to there was a forky in there and I didn't even think to shoot it because I was giving my son a life lesson. I was like, see, look, there they are. Look what we did. We got that close, but see how quiet we were being and they still heard us.
Right.
That's how hard this is. That's how
a deer's running away.
Yeah, the deer, they actually stopped for a little bit, and I was like, it was the first day. So I was like, I didn't want to shoot a forky, honestly, even though looking back, I'm like, I should have shot that thing. I didn't see anything else. But yeah, it was just really cool. And then he went out 3 or 4 more times with me. And it was just great because we had an amazing time together. Just and it's funny because I remember hunting before he was born, and kind of imagining in the future, this little mini guy behind me, following me, and I'm like, I get to teach him all the stuff I'm learning right now.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And it's this, like, who cares if I get a deer or not?
Right.
Like, this is what it's all about.
Well, and if he falls in love with it, imagine what he's going to be like.
Yeah.
He'll be starting
like
shooting deer at 10.
Right.
And what kind of outdoorsman is he going to be by the time he's even in his 20s?
Exactly.
And that I think is a really cool progression, is if your kids end up really interested in this lifestyle and participating in especially hunting, what kind of skill set do they end up with that most of the world doesn't have?
Right. Exactly.
And I don't know. I look at my dad teaching me as a kid, and now having my own kid, I'm starting to have those thoughts of, I just hope so bad that she's interested in hunting and fishing, and I can give them some of this knowledge so they can take that and build on it and figure out how to do it better than I can. I don't know. There's such a cool thing about that. And so there's so much high hopes for that I don't want to push it too much so that she's not interested at all.
Right.
But yeah, it's got to be a cool experience for your first time taking Parker out and him actually loving it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just like, most of all, just spending time together, but like, hey, here's this really cool thing that I love to do. Mm-hmm. Like, and just like teaching him through it and like just sharing my passion. I think he's like, oh wow, you're really like interested in this. Like maybe there's something to it,
Well, and if he loves it enough, maybe someday he's taking you out when you're older and he's showing you the stuff that he's learned, which is what I do with my dad now. Yeah. And my dad gets the benefit of still shooting bigger deer than me because I show him this is a spot where I saw like $15. If you go around this ridge, you'll be able to see if you can get a shot on. And then he sees a brand new buck that I never saw that's way bigger and shoots it. And then we get that experience together.
That was his plan all along.
It was.
Tyler, I'm going to train you up to go scout for me.
Yeah.
And you take me.
I do that with a lot of my friends. Like I told Levi, because I know how in shape Levi is, and he was in a podcast. I think he's in episode 3 or something like that. What episode is he in, Kai? Kai's our Jamie. Yeah. So Levi's in episode 3, and I told him that was the joke I made because I knew that dude can run marathons. He's in way better shape than me. Yeah. So I thought, if I can just teach him how to hunt, how to find these animals, he'll be able to find them for me. So I don't have to do all this scouting. And then we could just go up and participate in the hunting together. Yeah. Still hasn't happened. It's still an investment, but I think that's how it is with your kids. I think eventually they surpass you in the things that you love, and if they like it, and then they can show you a thing or two. Right. It's exciting. Yeah.
Very exciting.
See what the future holds.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I think it holds good stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is a good first podcast. We'll have you back after you experience a little bit of Texas, and after, depending on how your hunt goes this year for archery, if you get something, we'll have to have you back and you can tell that whole story.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I think it'd be cool.
I'll have to definitely try very hard to get one then so I can be back.
Yeah, otherwise I'm not having you.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I only invite people on this podcast who actually get animals. No, I think it'll be good. And I have high hopes for you this year because I think you're motivated. You're taking a class, and I'm really wanting to get another elk with my bow. I know that this last year, 2 years ago, you witnessed me hit one in a weird spot. Yeah. And so I've learned a lot from that. I'm hoping to build on that, and we'll see how this year goes.
Yeah. Did you end up getting elk this year with your rifle?
No.
Okay. But you got a deer.
Let me tell you briefly.
Okay.
Finishing this up.
Yeah. One last story.
What happened with this year's rifle tag. So this year I did not archery hunt for elk. I took Ben out a couple times. Instead, I had a rifle tag for elk, and it's usually a gimme. It's usually, if you get this tag, you're going to get a shot on an elk. And I have to say, first 5 days, I did have good shots on okay elk, nothing huge. But I definitely had easy shots on different bulls. And then 5 days in, all of a sudden the migration happened and I could not find a single elk. And when the migration happens, you have two options. You can follow the migration, usually out into the desert, and it's usually massive herds of elk. You're talking 200 elk in these herds.
Wow.
But you're chasing them in the desert, usually with a lot of other people. So you have people on four-wheelers, you have people on trucks. It's just so many desert roads that are chasing these elk. And most of the time, they're not even hunting for the bulls. Idaho gave out a stupid amount of cow tags this year. And so most of the time, these hunters are just shooting at the cows. And it's really competitive. I don't like it. So I choose the other option, which is the resident elk that try to stay in these snowy areas for long periods of time. There's typically a lot less of them now. And oftentimes they hang out down by the river or they're in very remote, hard to reach places. So that's the terrain I was hunting this year, was really remote, hard to reach places. The last day, and I'd hunted pretty much every day of the season. I was getting into herds here and there. I just kept passing up these smaller bulls because I wanted something bigger, which was stupid. I should have taken one the third day. I had a shot at a bull, a little 5x5, that would have been the easiest drag pack out of my life. And I just couldn't pull the trigger. It just didn't sit well. I just kept thinking there's got to be something better than this. And it was so early in the season. The last day, I'm driving out this road and I find a bunch of elk tracks that have crossed the road, really recent, probably that morning. I probably missed them by 30 minutes. And I park off on the snowy bank. I thought my truck was actually going to be stuck, but I didn't care. And I followed these tracks up the mountain, and I literally followed these tracks I continued mile after mile after mile, side hilling on a super snowy, steep slope and in the forest the entire time. And I just kept thinking, it's the last day. Who cares? I'll just keep going until I find these elk. I know they're right ahead of me. And eventually I came up and over this ridge and found the entire herd bedded down and the one big bull. And I knew there was a big bull because of the tracks. And all I could see was part of his antler and his ear. And that's all I could see. And so I'm setting up on this ridge and I'm trying to find a good angle. The problem was I was in the forest. They were in the forest on a ridge. And so I was trying to just part the trees with your bullet, trying to find the best path. And so I'm thinking I will literally sit here until that elk stands up. And when he stands up, I'll get a good shot. Unfortunately, the entire herd stood up. He still stayed bedded down.
Oh no.
There were a bunch of cows that passed right in front of him. And when they passed in front of him, he stood up. So I had cows in front of him. He stood up and he was just walking right behind them on the ridge. And then he just veered off into the forest. And the rest of them kept going up. And so I thought, perfect. Now I can just follow his tracks. I don't have to follow these other cow tracks. So I went up and over the ridge and saw him at about 450 yards on an open face. I could not get a clean shot. And 450 yards is, I don't want to shoot past 500. So 450 yards is starting to push my limit. And I kept creeping along the hillside, trying to get a little closer, but honestly, I could not get a clean shot through the forest. That was the biggest thing. I knew I would hit a branch or something. And so I finally found this spot where it looked like he was headed, where I had a clean shot through my forest and through his forest, where it was a gap in the forest. And I was waiting for him to walk through it. And I'd positioned myself in a spot where I couldn't see around this pine tree that was in front of me, but I knew if he just kept going where he was going, I'd have a 400-yard shot and I'd be perfectly set up for it. And I waited for probably 15 minutes, which was a little too long at the pace that he was going. And I finally took 50 steps to my right to get around this pine tree and saw that instead of the direction he went, he veered up and into this herd of 200 elk that I never even knew were there. I all of a sudden saw them all stand up as he veered up into them. And then he was merged with this giant herd of elk. Oh, and they went up and over the ridge. And this ridge was really far away, super steep.
Yeah.
So I, again, was like, it's the last day and it's still daylight. So I went up and over. And at this point, I'm pushing about 7.5 miles. And it just in horrible terrain. And I go up and over this ridge and I see them 2.5 miles away at this point. And they're way far back in the canyon, but they've kind of gone down. So I'm at a higher elevation than them. And my thought was, I had about 2 hours left of daylight. And my thought was, maybe they'll bed down. Maybe they'll stop moving. Maybe they'll position themselves so I can get a shot. But I knew I needed to get there in time before it got dark. So, and normally in any circumstance, I'd be like, I'll come back tomorrow because I know where they're going to be. But this was the last day. Yeah. I go down this hill and I thought, if I get down this hill and into the ravine, I'm going to have to hike back up 800 vertical feet or so. But if I can take a path that leads me to them, I'll have a good shot. I got down to the bottom of this thing. There was no path. It was all deadfall trees and snow and a river. And I could maybe make it 100 yards in like 10 minutes. So I'm continually hiking up and over logs and crawling under logs. And then I was in the river at one point, and I knew I couldn't make it in time. So I had to turn back and hike this super long draw all the way back. And on the way back, I kept seeing buck after buck after buck in the bottom of this canyon at 80 yards just looking at me. Decent bucks too. And that's how it goes. I'm not, I was chasing bull elk, not deer that day.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. That's always how it is.
I'm pretty sure this year when you were doing that, you were like, oh, you should come out here as I'm seeing all these bucks. Yeah. And I was hunting deer over in Boise going, well, I'm seeing all these elk. Right. Maybe you should come over here.
That's always how it is. But yeah, it was a really fun year. It's super disappointing that I didn't get that, but it motivates me this year for archery. Because of you always think, if only I had a rifle tag, I'd get that bull.
Right.
And then you do have the rifle tag and it felt significantly harder. So this year I'm really motivated. I have a lot of the gear to be able to camp long days out in the forest. So I'm planning on doing a lot of overnights, getting farther back in where maybe these elk haven't been pushed around by other hunters. So
yeah.
That's my future goal for next year. So I'm super excited, and it can't come soon enough.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that next year is my 3rd year with archery, and I got my first deer, my 3rd year hunting. Mm-hmm. So that might be my lucky number.
Yeah, I think so. Well, hopefully you do, and hopefully we can have you back on, and we can tell those stories for next year.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
this was fun.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.